My name is Greta, and at 67 years old, I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. The day I lost my husband, the morning my son moved out the afternoon, he announced his engagement to a woman who never liked me. But nothing prepared me for last Christmas when I spent 3 days cooking Michael's favorite meals, only to sit alone at a table for 3. The turkey grew cold as my tears fell hot. I never imagined finding that letter would change everything. Before I tell you how my heart was shattered that Christmas night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if my story resonates with you, please subscribe to hear more about life's unexpected turns and the lessons they bring. Michael was always a mama's boy in the best possible way. From the moment he was born, we shared a special bond that only grew stronger with each passing year. He was my little shadow following me around the house with curious eyes and endless questions. Even as a teenager, when most boys pull away, Michael and I remained close. We had movie nights every Friday, made pancakes together on Sunday mornings, and shared our deepest thoughts over cups of hot chocolate. When Frank, my husband of 35 years, died from pancreatic cancer 15 years ago, Michael became my rock. He was only 22 then, just starting his teaching career, but he called me every day and spent his weekends helping me adjust to life alone. The way he stepped up without complaint showed the kind of man he had become, a man his father would have been proud of. Michael inherited Frank's gentle nature and patient demeanor. He chose to teach 3rd grade because, as he put it, that is when kids are old enough to think independently, but still young enough to be excited about learning. His classroom was always filled with creative projects and laughter. Parents requested him specifically, and the principal often mentioned how fortunate they were to have him. Michael found genuine joy in nurturing young minds. Then Jessica entered our lives 5 years ago. She was striking with her sleek blonde hair and designer clothes, working at her family's high-end real estate firm. They met when Michael was looking for a new apartment, and within 6 months they were engaged. The wedding was lavish, held at her parents' country club, with 400 guests, most of whom I had never met. I wore my best dress and tried to fit in, but I felt like an outsider watching my son enter a world I did not belong in. In the beginning, I tried to build a relationship with Jessica. I invited them for Sunday dinners, sent thoughtful gifts on her birthday, and asked about her interests. But her responses were always polite, yet distant. She would check her watch repeatedly during visits and redirect conversations when Michael and I reminisced about the past. Gradually, our contact dwindled. Michael stopped calling as frequently. Invitations were declined with vague excuses about work commitments or prior engagements. Family celebrations that were once sacred became optional in their calendar. Last Thanksgiving, they canceled 2 hours before dinner, saying Jessica's mother had prepared a special meal that they could not miss. The most painful change came when Michael quit his beloved teaching position to work at her family's real estate company. When I expressed concern, he defended the decision as practical. "The money is better, Mom. We want to buy a house in Lakewood Heights." That was Jessica's parents' neighborhood, where homes started at $700,000. I watched my thoughtful, passionate son transform into someone who discussed property values and investment portfolios. His casual clothes were replaced with tailored suits, and his gentle laugh became a polished chuckle. He spoke of networking events and country club memberships. The Michael the First raised seemed to be fading away. My attempts to maintain our relationship became increasingly desperate. I sent care packages to their new luxury condo. I forwarded articles about education that I thought might interest him. I even tried learning about real estate to have something to discuss with them. Nothing seemed to bridge the growing gap. Our last meaningful interaction was 8 months ago when they came for dinner. I had prepared Michael's favorite lasagna, and for a brief moment, as he took his first bite and closed his eyes in appreciation, I saw my son again. But when I gently asked if he truly enjoyed his new career, Jessica interjected. "Michael is excelling in real estate. My father says he has natural talent," she said sharply. "Not everyone is meant to spend their lives making construction paper crafts with children." Michael stared at his plate as I fought back tears. When they left, he hugged me briefly and whispered, "I am sorry, Mom. That was the last time I saw him in person until that fateful Christmas." In the months that followed, I maintained our family traditions alone. I baked his favorite cookies on the first snow day, just as we had done throughout his childhood. I watched the old movies we used to enjoy together. I kept his childhood bedroom exactly as it was dusting the science fair trophies and rereading the stories he wrote in elementary school. I held on to hope that somehow, someday, my real son would return to me. The phone call came 3 weeks before Christmas. I was stringing cranberries for the tree, a tradition Frank started when we were newlyweds, when Michael's name appeared on my phone screen. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped it. "Mom." His voice sounded like home. I was wondering if the invitation for Christmas dinner still stands. "Jessica and I would like to come." The cranberries scattered across the floor as I stood up too quickly. Of course you can come. You are always welcome, Michael." We settled on 5 o'clock on Christmas Day. After hanging up, I danced around the living room like a schoolgirl, tears of joy streaming down my face. This was it. This was the chance to rebuild our relationship, to welcome my son back into my life, to perhaps even connect with Jessica. The next day, I drove to 5 different stores, preparing for the perfect Christmas dinner. At Wilson's butcher shop, I selected a 14-pound turkey, the plumpest one they had. Mr. Wilson himself helped me choose it, commenting on how happy I looked. "Special occasion this year, Greta?" he asked. I beamed as I told him my son was coming home for Christmas. At Langley's Grocery, I filled my cart with potatoes, green beans, cranberries, pecans, and all the ingredients for Michael's favorite sides and desserts. I spent $73 on specialty items alone, not minding the expense. At the wine shop, I selected a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon for $38, remembering that Jessica had mentioned liking red wine at some point. Back home, I began the deep cleaning that precedes special visitors. Every corner was dusted, every surface polished. I washed the windows despite the December chill making my fingers ache. I wanted the house to shine to welcome them properly. The guest bedroom was prepared with fresh linens in case they wanted to stay over. The decorating came next. I brought out all our cherished ornaments, each with its own story and memory. The handprint Michael made in kindergarten. The star Frank carved from oak the year we were too poor for store-bought decorations. The angel Michael selected on his 10th birthday with his own saved allowance. I hung them all with reverence, creating a tapestry of our family history. As I worked, I imagined Michael explaining these treasures to Jessica, sharing our stories, perhaps softening her view of me. Maybe she would see that I was not trying to compete with her or her family, but simply wanted to be included in their lives in some small way. 5 days before Christmas, I began preparing dishes that could be made ahead and frozen. Sweet potato casserole with the pecan crumble topping that Michael would sneak bites of before dinner was ready. Cranberry sauce, made from scratch, with orange zest, and a touch of cinnamon. My mother's dinner roll recipe that required 3 separate risings for the perfect texture. I set the dining table with my grandmother's china, the delicate pattern of blue flowers around the edges that only came out for the most special occasions. The silver had to be polished, each piece buffed, until it gleamed in the light, crystal water glasses that had been a wedding present. Cloth napkins ironed to crisp perfection and folded into the shape of Christmas trees, a trick I had learned from a magazine decades ago. For gifts, I spent hours selecting items with meaning. For Michael, I found an antique pocket watch at Marshall's Jewelers. It was silver with an intricate engraving of oak leaves, reminiscent of the trees in the park where we used to have picnics. I had it engraved with the message, "Time reveals what truly matters. Love, Mom." It cost $340, nearly a month of my grocery budget, but I did not hesitate. For Jessica, I selected a pair of pearl earrings, classic and elegant. I hoped they would suit her sophisticated style, while also being personal. The pearls reminded me of advice my mother once gave me about relationships. Irritation creates beauty if you are patient enough to see it through. Perhaps Jessica and I just needed more time to form a bond. My neighbor Eleanor stopped by while I was wrapping the gifts. She had been my friend for over 20 years, offering support through Frank's illness and the subsequent lonely years. Eleanor took one look at my frantic preparations and sat me down for tea. "Greta, you are putting an awful lot of pressure on this dinner," she said gently. "Maybe take a breath and remember that perfection is not what matters here." I sighed, setting down the ribbon I had been curling. "I know, but this feels like my one chance, Eleanor. If I can just show them how much they mean to me, maybe things can change." Eleanor patted my hand. "Second chances are precious. Just do not expect everything to be fixed in one evening. Relationships take time to heal." The night before Christmas, I was too excited to sleep. I double-checked the dinner preparations, confirmed that the turkey was thawing properly, and rearranged the presents under the tree at least 3 times. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon exactly as it had when Michael was growing up. I sat in the glow of the Christmas tree lights, imagining tomorrow's gathering. In my mind, Jessica would warm to me over dinner. Michael would remember the joy of family traditions. They might even decide to stay the night, and we would have breakfast together on Christmas morning like we used to. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt more hopeful than I had in years. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a new chapter for our family. I was sure of it. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold with a dusting of snow that made everything look like a greeting card. I woke at 5:30, too excited to sleep any longer. After making a cup of coffee, I stood by the window watching the sun rise, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. It felt like a sign that this day would be special. The turkey went into the oven at noon, filling the house with the rich aroma of roasting meat and herbs. I prepared the stuffing with dried cranberries and walnuts, just as Michael liked it. The potatoes were peeled and cut, waiting in cold water to be boiled and mashed. Green beans were trimmed and ready to be sautéed with bacon and almonds. Pie crusts were blind baked, awaiting their pumpkin and pecan fillings. By 3 o'clock, I took a break to get myself ready. I chose a deep red sweater that Frank always said brought out the warmth in my eyes, paired with black slacks and the pearl necklace he had given me for our 30th anniversary. I styled my silver hair carefully and applied makeup with a lighter hand than usual, wanting to look nice but not trying too hard. At 4:15, I was putting the finishing touches on the table. The good china gleamed against the cream-colored tablecloth. I had folded the napkins into perfect Christmas trees and placed them beside each plate. Crystal glasses caught the light from the candles I had arranged down the center of the table, interspersed with small arrangements of pine branches and red berries. Name cards written in my best calligraphy marked each place setting. By 4:30, everything was ready. The turkey rested under foil golden brown and perfectly cooked. Serving dishes were warmed and waiting. The gravy simmered gently on the stove. Rolls were timed to come out of the oven just as Michael and Jessica arrived. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and Christmas music played softly in the background. I poured myself a small glass of wine to calm my nerves and sat in the living room where I could see the driveway. At 4:45, I checked my appearance one last time in the hall mirror, smoothing my hair and straightening my sweater. 5 o'clock approached, and I positioned myself near the window, eager for the first glimpse of their car. 5 o'clock came and went. I told myself they were just running late. Traffic might be heavy. Or perhaps they had stopped to buy flowers or wine. I resisted the urge to call, not wanting to seem impatient or anxious. By 5:20, I checked my phone to make sure I hadn't missed a call or text. The screen showed no notifications. I sent a casual message. "Looking forward to seeing you both. Dinner is ready whenever you arrive." At 5:30, I returned to the kitchen to check on the food. The turkey was cooling too much, so I turned the oven to its lowest setting and placed it back inside. The potatoes needed to be reheated. The gravy had developed a skin that I whisked away. Still, these were minor issues that could be quickly fixed once they arrived. 5:45 brought the first genuine twinge of worry. I called Michael's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hi, just checking. If you are on your way. No rush, but let me know if you need directions or anything." I tried to keep my voice light, hiding the concern that was beginning to build. By 6 o'clock, my hands were shaking slightly as I called again. This time I tried Jessica's phone as well. Both went to voicemail. I sent another text. "Is everything okay? Please let me know if you are still coming." 6:15, 6:30. The house that had felt so warm and inviting now seemed to mock me with its emptiness. The candles had burned down by an inch wax, dripping onto my carefully arranged centerpiece. The rolls were cooling in the oven. The ice in the water glasses had melted. At 6:45, I walked to the front door and opened it, looking down the street as if I might see them walking up. The neighbor across the street was visible through his window, surrounded by family, all wearing paper crowns from Christmas crackers. They were laughing, their faces illuminated by warm light. I closed my door quietly. 7 o'clock. The reality began to settle like a weight on my chest. They were not coming. No call, no text, no explanation. Just absence and silence. I stood in the dining room looking at the table set for 3. My hands trembled so badly that when I reached for my wine glass, I knocked it over. Red wine spread across the cream tablecloth like blood staining my grandmother's lace. I couldn't bring myself to clean it up. My chest felt tight, each breath a conscious effort. The room seemed to spin slightly as I lowered myself into a chair at the head of the table. The chair where Frank used to sit. I stared at Michael's empty place, setting the napkin folded so carefully, the name card written with such hope. At 7:30, I forced myself to move. Mechanically, I began to transfer the untouched food into storage containers. The turkey, so perfectly browned, now seemed to represent all my wasted efforts. The sides, dishes prepared with love and care, were cooling and congealing. I couldn't bear to throw them away yet, though I had lost my appetite entirely. By 8 o'clock, I had blown out most of the candles, leaving only the Christmas tree lights illuminating the room. I sat on the sofa, still in my good clothes, staring at the presents under the tree. The silver wrapping paper on Michael's gift caught the light twinkling like a star. I had been so careful choosing that watch, imagining his face when he opened it. The silence of the house pressed in around me. No conversation, no laughter, no clinking of silverware against china. Just the faint melody of Silent Night from the forgotten Christmas playlist and the occasional pop from the dying fire. At 9 o'clock, I finally allowed the tears to come. They started slowly, then built into deep, wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the wasted food and the carefully chosen gifts. I cried for the relationship that seemed beyond repair. Most of all, I cried for the little boy who used to look at me like I was his whole world, who now couldn't even be bothered to call and say he wasn't coming. The harsh ping of my phone cut through my tears around 9:30. For a moment, hope surged that it might be Michael with an explanation. A flat tire. A miscommunication about the date. Anything that would make sense of this cruelty. Instead, it was a text from Eleanor Greta. I hate to show you this, but I think you should know. Attached was a screenshot from Instagram. My vision blurred with tears as I tried to focus on the image. It showed Michael and Jessica seated at an elaborately decorated table. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. A massive Christmas tree twinkled in the background. Jessica's parents flanked them, along with what appeared to be extended family, all dressed in coordinating outfits of cream and gold. Everyone held champagne flutes aloft in a toast. The timestamp showed it had been posted 2 hours ago. The caption read, "Nothing like spending Christmas with real family, honoring traditions that actually matter. This is where we belong. Blessed family first, Christmas glamour." The phone slipped from my numb fingers. They hadn't had an emergency. They hadn't forgotten. They had simply chosen not to come and hadn't bothered to tell me. While I sat waiting by the window, they were celebrating with her family, apparently having decided that my invitation, my traditions, my love, did not actually matter. A memory surfaced of Michael at 7 years old, helping me prepare Christmas dinner after Frank had to work an unexpected shift. "Don't worry, Mom," he had said, standing on a chair to reach the counter. "Me and you can still have Christmas. We are still family." The contrast between that sweet boy and the man who would abandon me without a word was too painful to bear. I stood up suddenly, nearly stumbling as my legs protested after hours of sitting. Moving like a sleepwalker, I went to the kitchen and began throwing away the food I had prepared with such care. The turkey, still warm in its core, went directly into the trash bag. The stuffing, the potatoes, the green beans, all scraped into the garbage without a second glance. The pies followed their perfectly crimped crusts, now meaningless. Each dish represented hours of planning and preparation, ingredients selected with care, recipes followed with precision. But more than that, each represented a memory I had hoped to share again with my son. The stuffing recipe passed down from my grandmother. The green bean preparation that Michael had always praised. The pecan pie that had been his favorite since childhood. As I dumped the cranberry sauce into the trash, watching the rich red color disappear beneath coffee grounds and vegetable peelings, I recalled making it with Michael when he was 10. He had been fascinated by how the berries popped open as they heated, releasing their tart juice. "It is like they are singing Mom," he had said. Now that memory, too, felt tainted. When the food was gone, I returned to the dining room and blew out the remaining candles. Smoke curled upward in thin gray ribbons, carrying away the last of my hopes for the evening. The room fell into darkness, except for the glow from the Christmas tree in the adjacent living room. I couldn't bring myself to turn on the lights, preferring the shadows that matched my mood. I sat again at the table, now cleared of food, but still set with the good china and silver. Wine still stained the tablecloth, spreading in a dark bloom. I traced the pattern with my finger, remembering other Christmases around this table, Frank carving the turkey with exaggerated ceremony, Michael telling jokes that made us laugh until we cried. The year we invited neighbors who had no family nearby, and ended up playing charades until midnight. Those Christmases felt like they had happened to someone else in another lifetime. The house that had once been filled with love and laughter now seemed to echo with absence. Every corner held a memory that stabbed like a physical pain. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made as a single mother after Frank died, working 2 jobs to ensure Michael could stay in the same school with his friends, skipping meals when money was tight so he could have new sneakers for basketball, spending nights helping with science projects and English essays when I was exhausted from work. Never once had I resented those sacrifices. They were made out of love, freely given. And this was how that love was repaid. With absence, with silence, with a social media post that made it clear I was not considered real family. The weight of rejection pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. I slumped forward my forehead, resting on the cool surface of the dining table. My body felt heavy, as if gravity had intensified, pulling me downward. The tears had stopped, replaced by a hollow emptiness that was somehow worse. For a moment, I considered drastic changes, selling the house filled with memories that now caused only pain, moving to a retirement community in Arizona or Florida, cutting off contact entirely and starting fresh where no one knew me or my history of maternal failure. What had I done wrong? Had I been too controlling, too permissive? Had I failed to set proper boundaries? Or was it simply that Jessica offered entry into a world of wealth and status that I could never provide? The questions circled in my mind, with no answers forthcoming. The clock in the hall struck 11, each chime like a nail in the coffin of my relationship with my son. I finally stood, my body aching from tension and grief. Without bothering to clear the table or clean the kitchen, I walked slowly upstairs to my bedroom. I removed the red sweater and pearls, carefully hanging them in the closet where they might not be worn again for a very long time. In my nightgown, I returned downstairs one last time to turn off the Christmas tree lights. As darkness enveloped the room, I whispered into the empty house, "Merry Christmas" to me. The words hung in the air, unanswered and alone. Morning arrived, with cruel brightness sunlight reflecting off fresh snow and streaming through windows I had forgotten to close the curtains on. For a moment, in the hazy space between sleep and wakefulness, I forgot the events of the previous day. Then reality crashed back, and the hollow feeling returned to my chest. I lay in bed longer than usual, finding no motivation to begin the day. What was there to get up for? An empty house, leftovers I couldn't bear to eat, presents that would remain unwrapped. Eventually, the habits of decades propelled me out of bed. I made coffee out of pure muscle memory, then stood at the kitchen window cradling the warm mug in both hands. Outside birds flitted around the bird feeder that hung from the old maple tree. It was the wooden one Michael had made in high school woodshop class, painted red with careful attention to detail. Despite everything, I had kept it filled through every season for 15 years. Watching the chickadees and cardinals peck at the seeds brought a small measure of peace. They depended on me in their simple way, unaware of human dramas and disappointments. Their needs were straightforward: food, shelter, safety. Perhaps there was wisdom in that simplicity. I bundled up in my warmest coat and boots to refill the feeder. The cold air bit at my cheeks as I stepped outside, but it felt clarifying after the stuffiness of grief that had filled the house. I trudged through the snow to the maple tree bird seed in a plastic container tucked under my arm. As I approached the feeder, something caught my eye. A corner of white protruded from the small covered area at the top of the feeder where extra seed was stored. It looked like paper, definitely not belonging there. Curious, I reached up and gently pulled it free. It was a small envelope protected from the elements by a Ziploc bag. My name was written on the front in handwriting I would recognize anywhere. Michael's neat, slanted script, so like his father's. My hands trembled as I opened the bag and removed the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and something small and metal that fell into my palm. A key, old-fashioned and brass, not like modern house keys. It seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't immediately place it. I unfolded the letter, bracing myself for whatever it might contain. Mom, if you are reading this, it means I failed to find the courage to face you in person today. I am so sorry, more sorry than words can express. Jessica gave me an ultimatum last night, her family or you. When I hesitated, she made it clear that if I chose to spend Christmas with you, I would not be welcome back home. I should have stood up to her. I should have told her that you are my mother and will always be part of my life. But I have become a coward, Mom. I have lost myself in this relationship, in the wealth, in the lifestyle that her family dangled before me like a prize for good behavior. The key enclosed is to the gazebo at Riverside Park. Do you remember how we used to go there when I was young? You would bring hot chocolate in the thermos with the red cap, and we would sit watching the ducks even in winter. Go there tomorrow at noon. What you find will explain everything. It is time for me to remember what really matters. I love you. I have always loved you even when I failed to show it. Michael. I read the letter 3 times each reading, bringing new waves of confusion and emotion. Anger came first. How dare he leave this cryptic message instead of simply calling me, then hurt at the confirmation that he had knowingly abandoned me. Finally, a flicker of hope ignited by his words about remembering what really matters. The key rested heavy in my palm. Now I recognized it. The old-fashioned brass key to the small Victorian gazebo in Riverside Park, 2 miles from my house. The park had several gazebos, but this one tucked away near the duck pond was special to us. Michael had held his 6th birthday party there. We had sheltered in it during sudden summer storms. We had sat there on countless weekend mornings, talking about everything and nothing. But why would Michael leave me a key to a public gazebo? And what did he mean by what you find will explain everything? Part of me wanted to ignore the letter to protect myself from further disappointment. If I didn't go to the gazebo, I couldn't be hurt again. I could hold on to my righteous anger and begin the process of accepting that my son was lost to me. Yet a mother's love is not so easily extinguished. Despite everything I wanted to understand, I needed to know what Michael was trying to tell me. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was still hope for reconciliation. I returned to the house, the letter and key clutched tightly in my hand. The coffee had gone cold, but I barely noticed as I sipped it, reading the letter again. Questions swirled in my mind. What ultimatum had Jessica given? Why had Michael hidden the letter in the bird feeder rather than simply texting or calling? What could possibly be at the gazebo that would explain everything? I spent the rest of the morning in a state of anxious anticipation. I cleaned up the dining room, finally washing the good china and silver, removing the stained tablecloth. The physical activity helped calm my racing thoughts. By 11:30, I had changed into fresh clothes and was ready to leave for the park. As I pulled on my coat, Eleanor called to check on me. I had texted her a brief update after finding the letter, and she was concerned. "Are you sure? You should go alone, Greta? I would be happy to come with you." "I appreciate that, but I think this is something I need to do by myself," I replied. "Whatever Michael wants to show me, it is between him and me." "Just be careful," she cautioned. and call me as soon as you get back. I will be worried sick otherwise." I promised I would, and set off for Riverside Park, the key safely tucked in my coat pocket. The drive to Riverside Park took only 10 minutes, but it felt much longer as my mind raced with possibilities. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I made my way along the path toward the duck pond. The park was quiet. On December 26th, most families still at home, enjoying new gifts or recovering from holiday festivities. Winter had transformed the familiar landscape into something magical and strange. Bare tree branches were outlined in white, creating intricate patterns against the blue sky. The duck pond was partially frozen with a few hardy mallards congregating in the remaining open water. My breath formed small clouds in the cold air as I followed the winding path toward the gazebo. Memories surfaced with each step. Michael at 4 throwing bread to the ducks with delighted squeals. At 8, learning to skip stones across the water in summer. At 12, confiding his first crush as we sat with our legs dangling from the gazebo's edge. At 16, discussing his dreams of becoming a teacher while we shared a thermos of hot chocolate. The gazebo came into view, a Victorian structure, painted white with delicate gingerbread trim. In summer, it was often occupied by park visitors seeking shade, but today it stood empty, a layer of undisturbed snow covering its floor. As I approached, I noticed something unusual. The shuttered sides that were normally open in warm weather and closed in winter had curtains visible through the slats. With trembling hands, I climbed the 3 steps and approached the padlocked door. The key slid into the lock, smoothly turning with a solid click. I pushed the door open and gasped at what I found inside. The interior had been transformed. Battery-powered string lights were draped along the ceiling, casting a warm glow. A small portable heater hummed quietly in one corner. The bench that circled the interior was covered with thick blankets and pillows. In the center stood a small table with another envelope, bearing my name propped against what appeared to be a photo album. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me to keep in the warmth from the heater. The transformation was remarkable. Someone had created a cozy haven within the public structure. Someone who knew how special this place was to me and Michael. I picked up the envelope with my name on it. Inside was a note and a USB drive. "Mom, this place has always represented the best of our relationship. Simple, honest moments together. I have come here often in recent months, trying to reconnect with the person I used to be before Jessica, before losing myself in a world of status and appearances. The album contains memories I have cherished, even when I failed to show it. The USB drive has a video message I recorded for you. I was too much of a coward to say these things to your face yesterday, but I hope you will listen. This key also opens another door. The address is written on the back of this note. Come there when you finish here. Love, Michael." With unsteady hands, I turned over the note to find an address written in the same neat handwriting. It was in my neighborhood only a few blocks from my house. I did not recognize the specific address, but the street was familiar. I set the USB drive aside and opened the photo album. The first page showed Michael as a newborn cradled in my arms in the hospital. I remembered that moment with perfect clarity, the overwhelming love I felt looking into his tiny face for the first time. The pages that followed documented our life together. Michael's first steps. His first day of kindergarten, proudly wearing a backpack almost as big as he was. The 2 of us building a snowman in the front yard. Family vacations to the lake. Michael's high school graduation with Frank and me, flanking him, our faces shining with pride. Most surprisingly, there were recent photos I had never seen. Michael sitting alone on this very gazebo's bench, looking thoughtful. Michael in a classroom, again, surrounded by young students. Michael standing in front of a small, modest house, holding a set of keys. I realized with a start that these recent photos showed no sign of Jessica or her family's influence. No designer clothes, no luxury settings. Just Michael looking more like himself than he had in years. My curiosity growing, I connected the USB drive to my phone. A video began to play, showing Michael seated in what appeared to be the gazebo recorded on a day when no snow covered the ground. "Hi, Mom," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "By now you know I did not make it to Christmas dinner. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for that, and for so much more. The truth is I have left Jessica. Or more accurately, she threw me out when I finally stood up to her. 3 months ago I told her I was leaving her family's real estate business to return to teaching. I had been miserable, Mom. Absolutely miserable. Selling overpriced houses to wealthy people, attending social events where appearances were all that mattered. I was losing myself more each day. Jessica was furious. She said I was throwing away everything her family had done for me. Her father called me ungrateful and weak. But for the first time in years, I remembered Dad's words about following your heart and being true to yourself. I have been living in a small rental house near you for 2 months now. I am teaching 4th grade at Riverside Elementary. The pay is less than half what I made in real estate, but I come home happy every day. I am finding myself again. I wanted to tell you all this in person on Christmas, but Jessica showed up the night before. She said her parents were willing to welcome me back if I cut ties with you completely. When I refused, she threatened to make the divorce as painful as possible. I panicked and failed you again. But no more. The key you found opens not just this gazebo, but also my new home. The address is on the back of the note. I will be there all day tomorrow preparing a proper Christmas dinner. Not as elaborate as yours would have been, but made with love. Please come, Mom. Give me a chance to explain everything properly and to begin making amends for years of neglect. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am asking for it anyway. I love you, Mom. I always have, even when I was too blind to show it." The video ended, and I sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down my face. Michael had left Jessica. He was teaching again. He had been living near me for months without my knowledge, and most incredibly, he wanted to rebuild our relationship. The mixture of emotions was overwhelming. Relief that my son had found his way back to himself. Hurt that he had hidden the truth from me for so long. Anger at Jessica and her family for their manipulation. Hope fragile but unmistakable that I had not lost my son after all. I gathered the album, the note, and the USB drive, carefully placing them in my purse. After turning off the heater and lights, I locked the gazebo behind me. The address on the note beckoned like a lighthouse in a storm. With a deep breath, I headed back to my car, ready to discover the final piece of this Christmas mystery. The address led me to a small bungalow on Maple Street, just 3 blocks from my own home. The modest house was painted a cheerful blue with white trim set back from the street, behind a small front yard. A wreath hung on the door, and through the front window I could see the glow of Christmas lights. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage. What would I say to him? How could we begin to rebuild after so much hurt? The anger I had felt was still there, but diminished now, overshadowed by the longing to reconnect with my only child. Finally, I walked up the shoveled path to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal Michael. His hair was slightly longer than when I had last seen him. He wore jeans and a simple flannel shirt, instead of the designer clothes Jessica had preferred. Most notably, his eyes held a warmth I had not seen in years. "Mom," he said simply, his voice breaking on that single word. For a moment we stood frozen, a chasm of hurt and misunderstanding between us. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me in a fierce hug. I felt his tears against my hair as my own soaked into his shirt. "I am so sorry," he whispered, over and over. "So incredibly sorry." When we finally pulled apart, he led me into the small living room. A modest Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with a mismatched collection of ornaments, many of which I recognized from his childhood. The furniture was simple but comfortable. No sign remained of the luxury lifestyle he had adopted with Jessica. "Welcome to my new home," he said, gesturing around with a mixture of pride and nervousness. "It is not much, but it is mine, and it feels more like home than that condo ever did." "It is lovely," I said sincerely. "How long have you been here?" 2 months, he admitted. "I wanted to tell you sooner, but I was ashamed. Ashamed of how I had treated you, of how easily I had been seduced by wealth, and status, of how weak I had been." He led me through to the small kitchen, where preparations for a meal were underway. A small turkey sat on the counter, vegetables were partially chopped on a cutting board, and the oven was preheated. "I thought we could cook together," he said tentatively, "like we used to. I cannot promise it will be as good as your dinner would have been, but—" "It will be perfect," I assured him, already rolling up my sleeves. As we worked side by side preparing the meal, Michael began to fill in the gaps in his story, how Jessica had gradually isolated him from me and his old friends, how her family had made him feel simultaneously special for being chosen and inadequate for his middle-class background, how the values he had been raised with were slowly eroded by constant exposure to their materialistic worldview. "It was like being slowly boiled alive," he explained as he chopped celery for the stuffing. "So gradual I didn't notice until I was nearly cooked." The breaking point came when her father asked me to mislead a young couple about serious foundation issues in a house they were considering. When I refused, he looked at me like I was an idiot and said, "This is business, Michael, not a classroom where everyone gets a gold star for good behavior." That night, Michael had driven to Riverside Park and sat in our gazebo for hours, contemplating what his life had become. The next day, he had applied for teaching positions without telling Jessica. When he was offered a job at Riverside Elementary, he had accepted immediately. The fight that followed when he told Jessica had ended their marriage. "She called me pathetic for wanting to work with children again," he said, his voice tight with remembered pain. "Said I was throwing away a real future to play with crayons and construction paper." That is when I realized how completely she had never understood me or respected what matters to me. By the time the simple but heartfelt dinner was ready, I had heard the full story of my son's journey, away from and back to himself. We sat at his small kitchen table, so different from the formal dining setting I had prepared the day before, yet somehow more meaningful. Before we ate, Michael reached across the table and took my hands in his. "Mom, I know saying sorry is not enough. I abandoned you when you needed me. I let Jessica and her family come between us. I missed birthdays and holidays. I made you feel like you did not matter." Tears filled his eyes as he continued. "The worst part is that I knew better. Dad raised me to value people over things. You taught me about loyalty and unconditional love. I threw those lessons away for granite countertops and country club memberships." I squeezed his hands. "We all lose our way sometimes, Michael. The important thing is that you found your path back." "I want to rebuild our relationship," he said earnestly. "Not just with occasional visits or phone calls, but really be in each other's lives again. Sunday dinners, movies together, holidays, all of it. I would like that very much." I replied, my heart lighter than it had been in years. As we ate, Michael told me about his new teaching position, his eyes lighting up as he described his students and their projects. This was the son I remembered passionate about education and making a difference in children's lives. After dinner, we sat in his living room with cups of hot chocolate, just as we used to do. The pain of the previous day had not disappeared entirely, but it had been transformed. Like a bone that breaks and heals stronger at the fracture point, our relationship had a chance to become more resilient through this ordeal. I learned something important through all this, Mom, Michael said thoughtfully. True connection cannot be bought with luxury or status. It is built through small moments of genuine caring. All those designer clothes and fancy restaurants never made me feel as content as sitting here with you drinking hot chocolate from mismatched mugs. His words resonated deeply with me. In my desperate attempts to win back my son's affection, I too had focused too much on the perfect meal, the expensive gifts, the immaculate house. But what mattered was not the trappings, but the love behind them. Sometimes we have to lose something temporarily to truly appreciate its value, I said. I never stopped loving you, Michael, even when it hurt the most. That is what unconditional love means. He nodded, wiping away a tear. I promise I will never take that for granted again. As evening fell, we decorated his Christmas tree together, adding a few ornaments I had brought from home. The simple joy of this shared activity felt like a healing balm on years of wounds. When it was time for me to leave, Michael walked me to the door. "Will you come for dinner again on Sunday?" he asked. "Nothing fancy, just us catching up properly." "I would love that," I said, embracing him one more time. As I drove the short distance home, I reflected on the lessons of this extraordinary Christmas. How easily we can lose sight of what truly matters in life. How material wealth pales in comparison to authentic connection. How even the deepest hurts can begin to heal when met with genuine remorse and love. My house no longer felt empty when I returned to it. Instead, it felt like a space filled with possibilities for the future. My son had found his way back, not just to me, but to himself. That was the greatest gift I could have received. Have you ever experienced a relationship that seemed beyond repair, only to find an unexpected path to reconciliation? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If my journey with Michael touched your heart, please subscribe to hear more tales of life's challenges and triumphs. Like and share this video if you believe in the power of second chances and the importance of valuing authentic connections over material wealth. Thank you for spending this time with me. And remember that sometimes what appears to be an ending is actually a new beginning.